Zethkara stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the fires burn on the human colony below. The orbital bombardment had been swift and complete. 3 million humans dead in less than 6 hours. Women and children mostly, just as his superiors had ordered. The agricultural world of New Haven had no military value, but that was exactly the point. Terror was a weapon, and the Veltar hegemony knew how to use it well. His tactical officer Velnok approached with a data pad. "Commander, we have captured several human vessels attempting to evacuate civilians from the outer settlements. 17 ships total. Most are damaged and their crews are requesting medical aid for wounded passengers." Zethkara barely glanced at the report. "Execute the crews. Dump the passenger compartments into space. Let the vacuum finish what our weapons started." He had conquered 12 species for the hegemony over his long career. Humans would be no different than the others. Show them enough brutality early and they would surrender quickly to save what remained of their population. The bridge crew worked efficiently as they had so many times before. Zethkara felt satisfaction as he watched more fires bloom across the colony surface. The humans had been warned to stay away from this sector of space, but they had ignored the warnings. They had established colonies here anyway and tried to claim the mineral-rich worlds that rightfully belonged to the Veltar. Now they would learn the price of defying a superior race. A communications alert chimed softly. "Sir, we are receiving a surrender transmission from one of the captured human vessels. Should I put it through?" Zethkara nodded. It was always satisfying to hear a defeated enemy beg for mercy. The main screen flickered and showed the bridge of a small human ship. The vessel was clearly damaged with sparks flying from several control stations. A man in a blue uniform sat in the captain's chair despite an obvious injury to his left arm. His name tag read Morrison, and he had the steady eyes of a career military officer. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Phoenix. We have wounded civilians aboard, including children who need immediate medical attention. We request safe passage to the nearest medical facility in accordance with galactic warfare conventions." Zethkara felt his mandibles click in amusement. "Captain Morrison, you are in no position to make requests. Your colony burns below us and your fleet is scattered across 3 star systems. The only thing I am willing to discuss is the terms of your unconditional surrender." Morrison stared at him for several long seconds. There was something in the human's expression that Zethkara could not quite identify. Not fear or despair as he expected, but something else entirely. Almost like disappointment. "Commander Zethkara, I presume. Your reputation precedes you. 12 conquered species in 30 years of service. Very impressive by Veltar standards." Morrison shifted slightly in his chair and winced from his injury. "I want you to know that we tried to avoid this outcome. Earth's diplomatic corps spent 6 months attempting to negotiate a peaceful resolution to our territorial dispute." Peaceful resolution. Zethkara found the concept laughable. "Strength is the only currency that matters in this galaxy, human. Your species lacks the will to fight for what you claim to want. That makes you weak, and weakness deserves no respect." Morrison's expression grew more serious. "We were willing to share the mineral rights. We even offered to relocate our agricultural operations to less contested worlds. All we asked was that you honor the colonial protection agreements and leave our civilian populations alone." He paused and looked directly at Zethkara through the screen. "But you chose to target our children instead." "Children are the future of a species," Zethkara replied coldly. "Destroying them sends a message that cannot be ignored. Your people will remember New Haven for generations and think twice before challenging us again." Something changed in Morrison's eyes then. The disappointment was replaced by something much darker. "Yes, Commander, we will remember New Haven. We will remember every child who died here today. We will remember their names and their faces and the sounds they made when your weapons fell from the sky." Morrison leaned forward slightly. "And you just made the biggest mistake in your species' history." Zethkara felt a flicker of unease but pushed it aside. Defeated enemies always made empty threats. It was part of their denial process before accepting reality. "Your threats are meaningless, Morrison. Your fleet is broken and your colonies burn. Earth itself will fall within the month. You attacked our civilians, Morrison said quietly. You killed our children. We were willing to find a peaceful solution, but you crossed the one line we told you never to cross. His voice carried a strange certainty that made Zeth Kara's scales itch with discomfort. We tried to warn your people. We sent diplomatic messages, explaining why you should reconsider your aggressive expansion. We even showed you recordings of our own history to help you understand what happens when someone pushes humanity too far. Your history means nothing to us. Then you never watched the recordings we sent. You never studied what we did to our own species when they threatened innocence. You never bothered to learn why we scattered ourselves across the stars in the first place. Morrison's smile held no warmth at all. We left Earth not because we were exploring or seeking new opportunities. We left because we were running away from ourselves, from what we could become when we stopped trying to be civilized. Zeth Kara activated his personal communicator. Security, prepare interrogation chamber 7. Our human guest will be joining us shortly for a more detailed conversation. He looked back at Morrison. Your philosophical discussions bore me, Captain. You will tell us the locations of your remaining fleet assets and the defensive capabilities of your home system. I'll tell you whatever you want to know, Morrison replied calmly, but it won't help you. 3 hours ago, hidden transmitters throughout human space began broadcasting a simple message to Earth Command. Protocol 7 is now active. All restrictions have been lifted. Full authorization has been granted. Authorization for what? Morrison's smile grew wider and somehow more terrible. For us to stop pretending we're just another peaceful spacefaring species. For us to show you what we really are when someone hurts our children. He leaned back in his chair as sparks continued to shower around him. Commander Zeth Kara, you and your people are about to discover why every other species in this galaxy learned to leave humanity alone. Why they stopped expanding into our territory after the first few encounters. Why they signed non-aggression treaties and agreed to neutral zones. More empty threats. In 72 hours, you're going to wish I was just making threats. You're going to wish you had listened to our warnings. You're going to wish you had accepted our offer of peaceful coexistence. Morrison's image flickered as his ship's power systems finally began to fail completely. Most of all, Commander, you're going to wish you had never heard the word human. The transmission ended abruptly as the Phoenix finally lost all power. Zeth Kara stared at the blank screen, feeling an odd chill despite the warm, recycled air of his bridge. He shook his head dismissively and turned to his crew. Human psychology was clearly different from other species, but fear and desperation made all creatures say strange things. Morrison was simply trying to maintain some dignity in defeat. But as Zeth Kara watched the last fires burn out on New Haven's surface, he could not quite shake the memory of Morrison's final smile, or the absolute certainty in his voice when he spoke of Protocol 7. 3 days passed since the destruction of New Haven, and Zeth Kara felt his confidence beginning to crack, like ice under pressure. His forward scouts had been sending increasingly disturbing reports from the edges of human space. Ships were appearing, from what their sensors had previously identified as empty star systems. Not the small patrol vessels and transport ships they had been fighting, but massive constructions that dwarfed even his flagship. Vel, Knock, approached his command station with obvious reluctance. Sir, we have received updated intelligence from Reconnaissance Drone Cluster 7. The readings are unprecedented. Zeth Kara studied the data streaming across his personal display and felt his blood grow cold. Energy signatures that made no sense according to known physics. Gravitational distortions around human vessels that suggested technology far beyond anything in the Veltar database. Hull compositions that seemed to bend light itself around their surfaces. These readings cannot be accurate. Run full diagnostics on all sensor arrays. We have run diagnostics 6 times, Commander. All equipment is functioning within normal parameters. The readings are correct. Velnock hesitated before continuing. Sir, there is something else. Long-range communications has detected a massive fleet mobilization from the direction of Earth. Preliminary estimates suggest over 8,000 vessels of unknown configuration. 8,000 ships. Zethkara's entire battle group consisted of barely 300 vessels, and that represented nearly 10% of the hegemony's total military strength. Where had the humans been hiding such a massive force? Every intelligence report had indicated that Earth's military consisted of perhaps 50 outdated warships and a collection of converted civilian vessels. The tactical display updated with new contact markers appearing throughout the sector. Zethkara watched in growing horror as red dots multiplied across his screens. Human ships were emerging from locations that had shown no previous signs of inhabitation. Asteroid fields revealed themselves to be camouflaged shipyards. Gas giant atmospheres disgorged massive vessels that had apparently been hiding in the crushing depths. Admiral Lisa Harper stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched her fleet take formation around her flagship. The vessel was over 2 kilometers long and bristled with weapon systems that had never been tested in actual combat. For 3 centuries, humanity had been preparing for this day. Every alien species that had ever threatened human colonies had unknowingly contributed data to Earth's war machine development. Dr. Peter Walsh monitored the deployment from his position in the ship's advanced weapons laboratory. Around him, technicians made final adjustments to devices that pushed the boundaries of known science. Quantum disruptors that could unravel matter at the subatomic level. Temporal displacement cannons that could age enemy vessels thousands of years in seconds. Consciousness transfer weapons that could trap an enemy's awareness in a failing body, while keeping them alive to experience every moment of destruction. Dr. Walsh, Admiral Harper is requesting final status on Project Nightmare. Walsh smiled coldly as he watched his life's work come online. Tell the Admiral that we are ready to demonstrate what happens when humanity stops playing by galactic warfare conventions. The Veltar wanted to see us at our worst. They're about to get their wish. Back aboard his flagship, Zethkara received his first real-time combat report and immediately wished he had not requested it. His outer patrol group had engaged a single human frigate that had approached their position alone. The engagement lasted exactly 14 seconds. The human vessel fired once and Zethkara's 3 patrol ships simply stopped existing. No explosion, no debris field, no distress signals. They were there one moment and gone the next. Get me a tactical analysis of whatever weapon they used. His science officer worked frantically at her station before looking up with obvious fear. Commander, we cannot analyze what we cannot detect. Our sensors show no energy discharge, no projectile launch, no gravitational anomaly. The weapon leaves no signature we can measure. More reports flooded in from across the battle zone. Human. Vessels were not engaging in traditional ship-to-ship combat. Instead, they seemed to be demonstrating different types of weapon systems. A Veltar destroyer found itself suddenly converted into a perfect sphere of transparent crystal. Its crew, still visible inside, frozen in their final moments of terror. A cruiser reported that their hull was turning to liquid metal, while their life support systems kept them alive to experience every second of the transformation. Morrison had been transferred to the detention center aboard Zethkara's flagship, but the human captain seemed strangely relaxed for a prisoner facing interrogation. He sat calmly in his cell reading from a datapad that the guards had somehow overlooked during their search. When Zethkara arrived to personally question him, Morrison looked up with that same unsettling smile. Enjoying the show, Commander? I told you that Protocol 7 had been activated, but I don't think you understood what that meant. What is Protocol 7? Morrison set down his datapad and leaned back against the cell wall. It's what we call total war authorization. See, humans have this unfortunate tendency to hold back during conflicts. We try to minimize casualties, preserve infrastructure, follow rules of engagement that other species established. Protocol 7 removes all those restrictions and tells our military commanders to use whatever methods are necessary to achieve victory. Zethkara felt his mandibles clicking nervously. You're trying to intimidate me with propaganda. Am I? Tell me, Commander, how many of your patrol groups are still responding to communications? Morrison's expression grew more serious. Your species made a fundamental error in judgment. You assumed that the ships you'd been fighting represented our full military capability. Those were research vessels and colony patrol ships. We use them to study alien technology and learn how other species fight. The detention center shook slightly as something impacted the flagship's outer hull. Emergency lighting activated and the soft hum of defensive systems powering up filled the corridor. Zethkara activated his communicator. "Bridge, report." "Sir, we are under attack by what appears to be a human stealth vessel. It materialized directly alongside our hull and fired some kind of boarding projectile. Security teams are responding to multiple hull breaches." Morrison chuckled softly. That would be Commander Rachel Stone and her Reaper units. They specialize in capturing enemy command vessels intact. You might want to consider surrendering now while you still have the option. We have over 2,000 crew members aboard. This ship. Your boarding party cannot possibly overcome our security forces. Commander Stone's people don't board ships to capture them through conventional assault. They board ships to deliver messages. Morrison stood up and walked to the cell's force field barrier. Would you like to know what message they're delivering? Today. Before Zethkara could respond, the lights went out completely. Emergency power flickered on a moment later, but something had changed. The normal background sounds of a functioning starship had stopped. No ventilation hum, no power distribution buzz, no distant engine vibration. The ship felt dead around them. Morrison*'s voice came out of the darkness with absolute certainty. The message is simple, Commander. Surrender now and we might let your crew live long enough to see their homeworlds one more time. Keep fighting and we'll demonstrate why every other species in this galaxy learned to fear the sound of human footsteps in their corridors. Zethkara tried to activate his communicator, but received only static. His personal scanner showed no life signs beyond Morrison and himself in the immediate area. 2,000 crew members and he could detect none of them. Either the scanners were malfunctioning or something impossible had just happened aboard. His flagship? What did your people do? They did what humans do when someone kills our children, Commander. They stopped being civilized. Morrison's smile was clearly visible even in the dim emergency lighting. Welcome to humanity's real war, the one we've been trying to avoid showing you for 300 years. The detention center door opened with a soft hiss, and a figure in dark armor stepped through. The human removed her helmet to reveal a woman with cold blue eyes and silver hair. She looked at Zethkara with the same expression someone might use when examining an interesting insect. "Commander Stone, I presume?" Morrison said politely. "How did the message delivery go?" "All crew members have been sedated and secured. No casualties yet. The commander here gets to watch what happens next." Stone turned to Zethkara. "Your people killed human children. That was a mistake. Now you get to learn why." Commander Rachel Stone led Zethkara through the corridors of his own ship, and he barely recognized what he saw. His crew members hung suspended in some kind of energy field, conscious but unable to move or speak. Their eyes tracked his movement, and he could see the terror in their expressions. Whatever the humans had done to them was not fatal, but it was clearly designed to maximize psychological impact. "Your people are experiencing what we call a neural interface," Stone explained as they walked. "They can see and hear everything, but cannot move or communicate. We want them to witness what comes next so they can carry the memory back to your homeworlds." They entered the main cargo bay where Stone's team had set up equipment that Zethkara did not recognize. Screens displayed footage from the attack on New Haven, children running from falling orbital bombardment, families huddled in shelters that offered no protection from Veltar weapons. Morrison stood near the central display watching the recordings with an expression of controlled rage. "We found these recordings in your ship's database," Morrison said without turning around. "Your people documented everything. Every target, every casualty, every moment of terror. You were proud of what you did." Stone activated a control panel and the suspended Veltar crew members throughout the ship began to experience the recordings directly through their neural interfaces. They felt every emotion, every moment of pain, every instant of fear that the human civilians had experienced during the bombardment. Zethkara could hear their muffled screams echoing through the ship's communication system. "This is psychological torture," Zethkara protested. "This is education," Stone replied coldly. "Your people need to understand what they destroyed before we decide their fate." She turned to face him directly. Do you know what makes humans different from every other species in this galaxy, Commander? Zethkara remained silent, afraid that any answer would only make his situation worse. We remember every slight, every injustice, every act of cruelty committed against innocents. We catalog them and study them and plan our responses with the thoroughness that other species reserve for scientific research. Stone gestured toward the screens showing New Haven's destruction. Your attack killed 3 million humans, including 800,000 children. We know their names. We know their ages. We know what they wanted to be when they grew up. Captain Steve Rogers entered the cargo bay leading a squad of armored humans carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. His unit patch identified them as Reapers, specialists in what the humans apparently called psychological warfare operations. Rogers approached Morrison and saluted formally. Admiral, we have received surrender requests from 17 Veltar vessels in the IM outer system. They claim they want to negotiate for the safety of their crews. Morrison finally turned away from the screens. Tell them that negotiation ended when they opened fire on civilian targets. Now they get to experience what we call justice. He looked at Zethkara with eyes that held no mercy at all. Your species is going to learn a lesson that will echo through galactic history for the next 1,000 years. The tactical display updated to show the positions of human fleet elements throughout the star system. Zethkara realized with growing horror that his forces were completely surrounded. Hundreds of human vessels had emerged from locations that should have been impossible to hide large ships. The humans had been planning this response for far longer than he had imagined. Dr. Helen Brooks materialized on the main screen, broadcasting from what appeared to be a research facility. Behind her, Zethkara could see scientists working with technology that seemed to blend advanced physics with biological systems in ways that made his scales crawl with revulsion. Admiral Morrison, Project Fear is ready for deployment. We have successfully mapped Veltar psychological responses and developed weapons specifically designed to exploit their species-specific phobias. Preliminary tests suggest a 97% effectiveness rate in inducing permanent psychological trauma. Morrison nodded grimly. Proceed with Phase 2 deployment. Target the command ships first. I want their leadership to understand what they've brought down on their people. Zethkara watched the display screens as human vessels began their systematics, destruction of his fleet. But these were not quick, clean kills designed to eliminate enemy forces efficiently. The humans were demonstrating weapons that seemed designed purely to terrorize. Ships were converted into geometric shapes that preserved their crews in perfect crystalline suspension. Others were aged rapidly until their hulls crumbled, while their occupants experienced centuries of decay in minutes. 1. Veltar cruiser found itself trapped in a temporal loop, experiencing the same moment of destruction over and over again while its crew remained conscious throughout each repetition. Another vessel reported that their hull was becoming transparent, exposing them to the psychological horror of seeing deep space pressing in around them, while their life support systems kept them alive. Why are you doing this to us? Zethkara finally asked. We are defeated. We surrender. Take our ships and let our people live. Stone laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You still don't understand, do you, Commander? This isn't about defeating your fleet or capturing your territory. This is about sending a message to every species in the galaxy. A message that will prevent future attacks on human civilians. Morrison walked over to stand directly in front of Zethkara. When we first ventured into space, we tried to be diplomatic. We offered trade agreements, cultural exchanges, peaceful coexistence with any species we encountered. Do you know what happened? Zethkara shook his head, not trusting himself to speak. 17 different species attacked our colonies, killed our civilians, enslaved our people. They all made the same assumption you made. They thought our peaceful overtures meant we were weak. Morrison's voice grew quieter but somehow more menacing. It took us 300 years to make them understand their mistake. Some species learned quickly after the first demonstration. Others required more extensive education. Rogers activated his personal communicator. All units begin Phase 3 operations. Full psychological warfare protocols are now in effect. Remember, we want survivors. Lots of survivors who can carry our message back to Veltar space. The screens throughout the cargo bay began showing footage from across the battle zone. Human ships were not simply destroying Veltar vessels anymore. They were capturing them intact and subjecting their crews to experiences designed to break their minds without killing their bodies. Consciousness transfer technology forced Veltar officers to experience death from the perspective of the human children they had killed. Memory implantation devices gave them perfect recall of every atrocity committed during the New Haven bombardment. "Your people will remember this day for generations," Stone told Zethkara. "Every child born in Veltar space will grow up hearing stories about what happens when you attack human civilians. They will learn to fear the sound of human ships dropping out of hyperspace. They will wake up screaming from nightmares about crystal tombs and temporal loops." Morrison checked his chronometer. "In 18 hours, your surviving forces will be released to return home. They will carry recordings of everything they experienced here. Every moment of fear, every second of helplessness, every instant of despair." He turned to face Zethkara directly. "And you, Commander, will live to tell the story of what happens when someone makes the mistake of hurting our children." Zethkara felt something break inside his mind as he realized the true scope of what the humans had planned. This had never been about military victory. From the moment his forces attacked New Haven, humanity had been orchestrating a psychological warfare campaign designed to traumatize his entire species. They had turned war itself into an art form, dedicated to ensuring that no one would ever again make the mistake of underestimating human capacity for calculated cruelty. The last thing he saw before losing consciousness was Morrison's smile, and the absolute certainty in the human's eyes that this lesson would never be forgotten. President Kate Williams stood before the assembled representatives of the Galactic Council, her image broadcast across known space from Earth's Capitol building. Behind her, holographic displays showed real-time footage from the ongoing operations against Veltar forces. The other species ambassadors sat in stunned silence as they watched humanity's true military capabilities unfold before their eyes. "For 3 centuries we have offered you partnership, trade, cultural exchange, and peaceful coexistence. We showed you our art, our music, our literature, our capacity for creation and joy. We invited you to our worlds, shared our technology, and opened our hearts to the possibility of true galactic civilization." Williams paused, allowing her words to sink in. "But some of you chose to see only weakness in our openness. You mistook our restraint for inability, and our mercy for cowardice." The Veltar representative tried to stand but found himself unable to move. Like his compatriots throughout the galaxy, he had been fitted with a neural interface that prevented any aggressive action while allowing him to witness everything. Williams continued her address while he struggled helplessly against the invisible bonds. "The Veltar hegemony attacked our civilian colonies. They targeted agricultural worlds with no military value. They killed our children and recorded their dying moments as trophies. They broke the one covenant that every civilized species must respect." Her voice grew harder. "Now they will learn why every other aggressive species eventually chose to leave humanity alone." Colonel Dan Murphy led the assault on Veltar Prime, the homeworld of the species that had made the fatal mistake of attacking human children. His orders were specific and came directly from Earth Command. The planet was not to be conquered quickly or efficiently. Every Veltar citizen was to experience exactly what their military had inflicted on human colonies. The operation was designed to take weeks, and every moment would be recorded for distribution throughout the galaxy. The human fleet surrounding Veltar Prime consisted of over 300 vessels, each one equipped with weapons that had been specifically developed for psychological warfare. Instead of orbital bombardment, they deployed devices that created localized atmospheric disturbances. Veltar cities found themselves experiencing weather patterns that should have been impossible. Gravity fluctuated randomly, causing buildings to crumble slowly while their occupants remained trapped inside. Temperature variations turned populated areas into alternating zones of freezing cold and searing heat. Zeth quote, Kara watched the destruction of his homeworld from his cell aboard Morrison's flagship. The humans had kept him alive specifically to witness this moment. They wanted him to understand the full scope of their retaliation and carry that knowledge back to whatever remained of Veltar civilization. "Your cities are burning," Morrison informed him as they watched the feeds together. "But notice how slowly they burn, how carefully we control each collapse. Your people are experiencing terror in precisely measured doses. No one dies quickly. No one escapes the fear." The tactical displays showed human forces systematically processing Veltar population centers. Citizens were being captured and subjected to the same neural interface technology that had been used on military personnel. They experienced the memories of every human child who had died in the New Haven bombardment. They felt every moment of pain, every instant of fear, every second of despair that their military had inflicted on innocent civilians. Dr. Brooks appeared on the communication screen, reporting from her mobile laboratory that had been deployed to Veltar Prime's surface. "Admiral, we have successfully processed approximately 60 million subjects. Psychological conditioning is showing expected effectiveness rates. The population is developing species-wide trauma responses that should persist for several generations." Morrison nodded approvingly. "Excellent work, Doctor. Make sure every subject receives the complete experience. I want them to understand precisely what their military did and why they are being punished for it." Lieutenant Amy Collins entered the detention area carrying a datapad containing reports from across Veltar space. Her expression was grim but satisfied as she updated Morrison on the progress of their operations. "Sir, we have received surrender offers from over 400 Veltar worlds. They are offering complete capitulation, reparations, and permanent monitoring agreements." "And our response?" "We are accepting their surrenders but continuing the psychological processing. Command has determined that mere capitulation is insufficient. The entire species needs to be conditioned to prevent future aggression against human targets." Seth Kara listened to their conversation with growing horror. The humans were not simply conquering his people. They were systematically breaking their minds and rebuilding their psychology to serve as a permanent warning to other species. Every Veltar who survived this war would carry trauma specifically designed to trigger whenever they encountered humans. The screens in his cell showed footage from human-controlled areas of Veltar Prime. Citizens were being sorted into processing centers where they underwent procedures that implanted detailed memories of human suffering. Children were given age-appropriate versions that would grow more intense as they matured. Adults received the full psychological impact of experiencing death from the perspective of every human civilian killed in the bombardment. Morrison sat down across from Zethkara and activated a personal holographic display. "I want to show you something, Commander. These are records from humanity's expansion into space over the past 3 centuries. The display showed a timeline of human colonial development and the various alien species they had encountered. Species after species had initially responded to human contact with aggression, seeing opportunity in what they perceived as weakness. Each conflict followed the same pattern: attacks on human civilians followed by swift and devastating retaliation that left the aggressive species psychologically crippled. The Cathani were the first to attack our colonies. They killed about 500,000 humans before we responded. It took them 50 years to recover enough to function as a civilization. The Morden lasted 6 months before surrendering, after we demonstrated what we could do to their breeding worlds. The Zephyr tried to enslave human populations for forced labor." Morrison smiled coldly. "They still wake up screaming 3 generations later." Zethkara realized he was looking at a pattern of calculated psychological warfare that stretched back centuries. Humanity had not been exploring space or seeking new opportunities. They had been systematically conditioning every species they encountered to fear the consequences of aggression against human targets. "Your species is not unique, Commander. You are simply the latest to learn why attacking human civilians is the worst mistake any species can make." Morrison gestured toward the screens showing the ongoing processing of Veltar populations. "When this is over, your people will be released to rebuild their civilization, but they will never forget what happened here. Neither will their children, or their children's children." Engineer Ben Carter appeared on the communication display, reporting from the quantum monitoring station that had been established in Veltar space. Admiral, the surveillance network is online. Every Veltar citizen has been tagged with quantum markers that will trigger if any member of their species ever again raises a weapon against a human target. Response time to anywhere in Veltar space is now under 6 minutes. Morrison thanked Carter and turned back to Zethkara. Your entire species has become a living demonstration of what happens when someone hurts our children. Every alien race in the galaxy will study what we did to your people and remember the lesson. The final phase of the operation began as human forces started their withdrawal from Veltar space. But they were not simply leaving. They were establishing permanent monitoring stations throughout the region and embedding human agents in every major population center. The Veltar would be allowed to rebuild their civilization, but they would do so under constant observation. Williams concluded her address to the Galactic Council with words that would be remembered for millennia. We did not choose this path. We offered you alternatives. We showed you our capacity for peace and cooperation. But when you chose to target our innocence, you forced us to reveal what we become when mercy is no longer an option. She looked directly at each alien representative. Remember this day. Remember what you witnessed here. And never forget that humanity's greatest strength has always been our willingness to become monsters to protect our children. Zethkara was released 18 hours later, along with the surviving members of his crew. As his damaged ship limped toward the nearest Veltar outpost, he carried with him the recordings of everything he had witnessed. He would spend the rest of his life telling the story of humanity's response to the New Haven attack. And every species in the galaxy would learn to fear the sound of human ships dropping out of hyperspace. 5 years had passed since the war ended, and Zethkara lived on a reservation world under constant human supervision. The planet was comfortable enough, with adequate food and shelter for the surviving Veltar population, but freedom was an illusion they would never experience again. Every morning when he woke, the quantum monitors embedded in his nervous system reminded him that humanity was watching. Every breath he took was recorded, every thought monitored, every movement tracked by systems he could not see or understand. He had become something of a celebrity among galactic historians and xenopsychologists. Researchers from dozens of species came to interview him about his experiences during the war. They wanted to understand how humanity had achieved such complete psychological dominance over an entire civilization. They studied his trauma responses, analyzed his behavioral patterns, and documented the long-term effects of human psychological warfare techniques. Professor Alex Turner was the latest human researcher to request an interview. Unlike the aliens, who came to study Zethkara like a laboratory specimen, Turner seemed genuinely interested in understanding the war's aftermath from a sociological perspective. He sat across from Zethkara in the small apartment that served as both home and prison, his recording devices capturing every word and gesture. "Tell me about the nightmares," Turner said gently. "The medical reports indicate that 97% of Veltar survivors experience recurring dreams about human children. How has this affected your people's ability to function as a society?" Zethkara stared out the window at the other survivors going about their daily routines. Every one of them moved with the careful, measured steps of people who had learned to fear their own shadows. "We cannot have children anymore," he said quietly. "Not because we are physically unable, but because seeing young faces triggers the implanted memories. We experience their fear, their pain, their final moments. Our reproductive rates have dropped to near zero." Turner made notes on his datapad while maintaining eye contact. This was another difference between humans and other species. Most aliens found prolonged eye contact aggressive or threatening. Humans used it to establish emotional connections even with their former enemies. And how do you cope with knowing that your species will likely face extinction within a few generations? We tell ourselves that this is what we deserve, that our military made choices and we must live with the consequences. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between the monitored thoughts and recorded conversations, we wonder if our punishment truly fits our crime. Zethkara turned away from the window to face Turner directly. 3 million humans died in our attack. How many Veltar will never be born because of what your people did to our minds? Turner's expression remained neutral, But Zethkara caught a flicker of something that might have been sympathy. The psychological conditioning was designed to prevent future aggression, not to cause extinction. If your reproductive rates continue to decline, adjustments can be made to the neural programming. Adjustments. Zethkara laughed bitterly. You speak of our minds as if they were machines that can be reprogrammed at will. Perhaps from your perspective, that is exactly what we have become. Admiral Morrison visited the reservation world every few months as part of his duties, overseeing the post-war reconstruction efforts. Now promoted to Fleet Admiral, he carried the responsibility for monitoring 17 different species that had been educated about the consequences of attacking human civilians. His visits were always announced in advance and conducted with formal protocol, but Zethkara knew they were also psychological maintenance sessions designed to reinforce the conditioning. Commander Zethkara, Morrison said as he entered the apartment with his usual escort of armed guards. I trust you are adapting well to your new circumstances, as well as can be expected for someone living under permanent house arrest. Zethkara stood and offered the traditional Veltar greeting gesture, a habit he had maintained despite everything. I assume you are here to ensure that the monitoring systems are functioning properly. Morrison activated a small device that projected a holographic display showing Zethkara's psychological profile, brainwave patterns, stress responses, memory integration rates, and dozens of other metrics that reduced his mental state to a collection of data points. Actually, I wanted to discuss something more personal with you. Do you ever wonder how we live with what we did to your people? The question caught Zethkara off guard. In 5 years of interviews and monitoring sessions, no human had ever asked his opinion about their own psychological state. I had assumed that humans were simply better at compartmentalizing violence than other species. We are. But that doesn't mean we don't struggle with the choices we make. Morrison gestured for Zethkara to sit and took the chair across from him. When your forces attacked New Haven, they killed a little girl named Emma Rodriguez. She was 6 years old and loved to draw pictures of flowers. Her artwork was displayed in the colony school's main hallway. Zethkara felt his embedded neural responses triggering as Morrison spoke. The conditioning forced him to experience Emma's death from her perspective, to feel her confusion and terror as the orbital bombardment began. He gripped the arms of his chair and waited for the episode to pass. I can see the programming is still functioning properly, Morrison observed clinically. But what you don't know is that I experienced the same memories. Every human involved in your people's punishment carries the psychological imprint of every child who died in our colonies. We live with their fear, their pain, their final moments, just as you do. Then why did you do it? Why create such elaborate tortures when simple military defeat would have achieved the same strategic objectives? Morrison was quiet for several minutes, staring at something only he could see. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weariness that Zethkara had never heard before. Because we learned something terrible about ourselves during our expansion into space. We learned that we have an almost unlimited capacity for violence when someone threatens our innocent. And we learned that the only way to prevent that violence from consuming us completely was to make sure no one ever gave us a reason to use it. The apartment's monitoring systems chimed softly, indicating that their conversation was being recorded and analyzed by human intelligence services. Morrison ignored the sound and continued speaking. Every species that has ever attacked human civilians has faced the same response. We break their ability to wage war, implant psychological conditioning to prevent future aggression, and then spend generations carrying the guilt of what we were forced to become. Forced, Zethkara repeated. You speak as if you had no choice in the matter. We didn't, not really. When someone kills our children, we stop being human in any meaningful sense. We become something else entirely, something that exists solely to ensure that the threat is eliminated permanently. Morrison stood and walked to the window overlooking the reservation grounds. Do you know what the worst part is, Commander? Zethkara waited silently for the answer. The worst part is that it works. No species has ever attacked human colonies twice. The psychological conditioning we implant lasts for generations and serves as a deterrent to others who might consider similar actions. We have achieved almost perfect peace through the systematic brutalization of anyone who threatens our innocence. Morrison activated his personal communicator. Transport, this is Admiral Morrison. I'm ready for extraction. He turned back to Zethkara one final time. Your people will be allowed to rebuild eventually. The conditioning will be modified to allow normal, reproductive behavior. Your species will survive, but it will carry the memory of this lesson forever. And you, Admiral, how will you live with the memory of what you did to us? Morrison's smile held no warmth at all. The same way we always have, Commander. We carry the darkness so our children can walk in the light. We become monsters so they can remain innocent. And we make sure that every species in the galaxy understands that this darkness is always watching, always waiting, always ready to emerge if anyone makes the mistake of threatening what we love. After Morrison left, Zethkara sat alone in his apartment writing in the journal that had become his constant companion. The words came slowly, each one carefully chosen to convey the true horror of his situation to any future readers who might discover his account. I survived humanity's wrath, and I have learned that survival is not always a gift. Sometimes it is a burden you carry to ensure others never make the same mistake. I am alive so the galaxy remembers that humans are not the peaceful explorers they appear to be. They are predators who have learned to wear the mask of civilization. They offer trade and friendship and cultural exchange. But beneath that facade lurks something that should never be awakened. He paused in his writing to watch the sunset through his window. Other Veltar moved through the grounds below, their movement still reflecting the careful precision of people who had learned to fear their own instincts. Never hurt a human child. Never make them show you what they really are when mercy is no longer an option. Because once you have seen it, once you have experienced their capacity for calculated cruelty,